Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum, dear students. I am Mr. Kadim Khan. I am a lecturer in the Institute of Computing, Guwahati University of Science and Technology. Today we will take lecture number 16 of the subject of software engineering, in which we will discuss the software requirement engineering. This is much detailed topic which will provide a technical background about software requirement engineering. This is the discussion agenda. The discussion agenda include the topics of the requirements, software requirement engineering, types of software requirement engineering, which contains the functional requirements, non-functional requirements, and the domain requirements. What is the requirements? Basically, requirements is the high-level abstract representation of the system services that to be delivered to the customers under certain constraints. The requirements are in fact the mathematical functional representation of the system services. The requirements are act as a dual purpose. Number one, the requirements are basis for the bid for a contract. The contract is in fact the legal document which is signed between the two parties. So therefore the contract must be open to interpretation. Secondly, maybe the basis for the contract itself, therefore, must be defined in detail. So hence, the requirements must be very much defined in detail. Because requirement acts as like the contract itself. The contract shows that the customer and the developer are bound with each other for the softwares which will be provided within the certain amount of time and budget. But these statements may be called requirements. So that is in fact the software requirement specification documents which include software requirements. Requirement engineering. Requirement engineering is a huge branch of computer science which represents the process of establishing the services that the customer requires from a system, the constraint under which it operates and it is developed. So the requirement represents certain constraints under which the software will be developed. For example, the development constraints, the technology constraints, the budget constraints, and the time schedule constraints. So requirements is the description of the system services and the constraints that are generated under the requirement engineering process. Now, types of software requirements. There are three different types of software requirements. The first one is called the functional requirements. The functional requirement represents the functionality of the system. In these types of requirements, all the functionality of the system must be defined in detail. That how the system should react to the user for the particular input and how the system should behave in the particular situation. Number two, non-functional requirements. Non-functional requirements are also called quality requirements. These are certain constraints such as the timing constraints, the process constraints, the standard constraints, and the development constraints as well. So non-functional requirements are those requirements which in fact signifies the softwares. It doesn't represent the functionalities, but it makes the functionality more refined. And number third, the domain requirements. As its name indicates, the domain requirements are those requirements which represents the domain of the software. The requirement that's come from the application domains of the system and that reflects the characteristics of that domain. For example, the mobile domains, the Windows application domains, the game domains are called the domain requirements. Now we will discuss each and every one in more details here. The functional requirements. Functional requirements is the functionality of the system. The functional requirement part discusses the functionality required from the system. For example, the web browser is a software. The functional requirements of the web browser are to browse the websites. Similarly, to save the websites is also the functional requirements of the web browser. So the system is considered to perform a set of high-level functionality. For example, Fi is the set of the functionality. So each function Fi of the system can be considered as a transformation of the set of input data to the corresponding set of the output data. For example, this is the input data. There are multiple input data I1, I2 and so on, In, and if this input is accepted by the software, that is the system, that represents Fi. And when this input is transformed into the output, that is, there will be many outputs will be created. Output 1, output 2 and so on, output n. So the input is transformed into the output using the software system. So that is called the functional requirements of the system. Functional requirements can be represented in the certain ways. For example, diagrammatically we can use some sort of the flowchart, etc. Functional requirements FI is considered is the transformation of the set of inputs data to some correspondence output data. For example, this is the input data FI. This is transformed into the output data here. Now we will see some examples to represent the functional requirements. Functional requirements example is here. Consider case of the library system. Searching the book is the functional requirement and it is represented with the F1. And input is the author's names of the book. So the output will be the detail of the author's books and the location of these books in the library. So here we will represent the author name as a function input and F1 is the function, that is function 1, and the output will be the detail books detail. So here, for example, if we provide the name of the author such as the Robert Lefort, it will give us the book details that object-oriented programming in C++ by Robert Lefort. So this is the output here. So this is the abstract representation of the functional requirements of the software. Non-functional requirements. The non-functional requirements are those requirements which sophisticates the functional requirements. So non-functional requirement deals with the characteristics of the system which cannot be expressed as a function, such as the maintainability of the system, portability of the system, usability of the system, etc. So the functional requirements are those requirements which are used to enhance the software. The non-functional requirement may include as reliability issues, accuracy of the results, human-computer interface issues, constraints on the system implementation, etc. So these are different examples of the functional requirements. The non-functional requirements can be divided into many types. The product requirements. Product requirements are those non-functional requirements which are associated with the products. These are associated with the software systems. So the requirement will specify that the delivered products must behave in a particular way. For example, execution speed, reliability, etc. is called. These are called the product requirements. Organizational requirements. Organizational requirements are those requirements which are relevant with the development organizations. They have the relation with the development organization, such as the process standard used by the developer organization, implementation requirements, etc. So this represents the policy and procedure of the organization. It includes the process standards, for example, that the waterfall model is a process, spiral model is a process, similarly agile model is another process, XP model is a process. For example, which sort of process the particular organization uses for the development. Similarly, implementation requirements means what types of implementation technology is used by the organization. For example, C++, Java, C#, etc. is the implementational requirements. Number third, external requirements. External requirements are also the types of non-functional requirements. External requirement which arises the factors such as external to the system and its development process. For example, interoperability requirements, legislative requirements, etc. So external requirements are those requirements which are external to the organization and the product. For example, interoperability requirement. Interoperability requirement shows that how the software end is interoperable with the other types of softwares. Legislative requirement shows that what sort of legislative, that is the order, law and order situation, can be imposed on the product. This is the non-functional requirement types. We have non-functional requirements types. We will discuss each and every one in much detail there. There are three types of non-functional requirements: product requirements, organizational requirement, and external requirements. Now, these are the examples of the non-functional product requirements. Number one, usability requirement. Usability requirements are those requirements which shows the user interface of the system. How the user interface is very much usable to the particular user. Similarly, the product requirements, the efficiency requirements are that requirement which is relevant with the product requirements. The efficiency requirement shows the efficiency or the performance of the particular software. The efficiency requirement is broken down into two different types of requirements. Number one, the performance requirements. Number two, the space requirements. Performance requirement shows the performance of the softwares. For example, in how much particular unit of times the number of execution has been performed. Similarly, space requirements. Space requirements here shows the space of the softwares that has been taken on the operating system. Space requirements here means that how much GB space or gigabyte space is required by the softwares when it will be installed on the user environment, or what sort of RAM is required, how much hard disk is required, etc. is called the space requirements of the softwares. Another types of product requirement is the reliability requirement. Reliability shows that how much the software is reliable or how much number of defects that can occur in the software. If less number of defects are identified by the end user, then the software is called more reliable. And if the software has many defects, then the software is called less reliable. Similarly, portability requirements. Portability requirement shows that how the software is portable. If the softwares can be used in many areas or in many environments, then the software is very much portable. Number second, organizational requirements. Organizational requirements, as already we discussed, contains the organizational standard and procedures of the systems. Here we can divide it into three different types of organizational requirements. The delivery requirements. Delivery requirement shows the organizational requirements and it shows that how much fast the software will be delivered to the customers, or how much the organization is very good for the delivery of the software. Similarly, implementational requirement shows that the implementational technology required by the organization to develop the software. Similarly, the standard requirement shows that the standard procedures such as IEEE standard, ISO standard, CMMI standards that will be used to develop the software that represent the standard requirements. Now the external requirements. External requirements are also another types of requirements. There are many external requirements such as interoperability, that the software is interoperable with the other types of software. Similarly, the ethical requirements are also called the moral requirements, which shows morally the software is very good for the community. Similarly, the legislative requirements are called the law and order requirements. It represents the requirements in the form of the privacy and safety. Privacy shows that how the software is very good to keep the data private for the particular customer. And legislative requirement shows that how the software is safely used so that it provides the safety to the customers. Now we will discuss each and every one in very much detail. Availability requirements is that what is the uptime of the software during particular period of times. The uptime of the softwares can be measured in the MTTF and matrices and MTTR matrix. So the availability is equal to MTTF divided by MTTF plus MTTR. That means that availability is equal to means times to failure divided by means times to failure plus means times to repair. So this is the matrix used to compute the availability requirements of the software. So availability means certain tasks are more time critical than others. And user become frustrated when they need to get essential works done and the system is not available. So which task represents availability? Those tasks which are using large sort of databases are those functions which accesses the huge amount of database. Here the availability issue will arise. For example, if we have a large database, then the availability problem arises here. So that is the example of the task which in fact creates the availability problem. Another non-functional requirement type is called function efficiency. Efficiency is the measure of how well the system utilizes processor capabilities, disk space, memory, or communication bandwidth. Efficiency shows that how the particular software is efficient for the performance of the particular task. If the system consumes too much of the available resources, user will encounter degraded performance, a visible indication of inefficiency. Flexibility. Flexibility shows that how the software is flexible and can be changed according to the user needs. So here the flexibility means that how easily it is to be add new functionalities to the product. If the developers anticipate making many enhancements, they can choose design approaches that maximize the software's flexibility. So the software flexibility will be in fact decided by the user. So the user wants to change for example, the user interface, then the software will be very much flexible. Exactly like Windows, when the user want to add more themes. So attribute is essential products that is developed as an incremental iterative fashion through the series of successive release by the evolutionary prototypes. The flexibility is added through the iteration. So more iteration add more flexibility. Interoperability means that the system is interoperable in the many environment and can change the data or services with other systems. Reliability shows that the softwares perform very well in every situation and the system is very much reliable and the system doesn't crash and doesn't fail. Robustness means that the system doesn't have fault tolerance facilities. That is called robust. For example, it always fight against the viruses, etc. Usability requirement shows that the software is very much usable and it has the user-friendly interface. If the software is not usable, then the performance requirements will be automatically upgraded as system usage will be very much slow. Integrity requirements is suffers don't want personal confrontation information, a record of the sites they visit to be used inappropriately. Integrity requirement shows that the software cannot be broken down. So the software is very much strong, it cannot be hacked, which include the security, privacy, integrity requirements and no tolerance for the errors. So the software is very much strong. It has a strong encryption and decryption algorithm implemented in the software. Maintainability requirement shows that the easy maintenance of the software. The software will be easily used by the user and it has the maintainability and change management properties so that the developers can easily change it and the developer can understand its previous codes, can change it and retest the software. This is the end of the lecture, students. If you have any question, you can send me your email at my ID. My email ID is in the footer section of the slides. My email is m.kadeem@kust.edu.pk. Thank you very much.